Defense Minister Jason Kenney announcing new measures to deal with sexual misconduct in the military 2 weeks ago. A retired Supreme Court judge said an independent agency was, in her words, essential to deal with what she identified as a hostile sexual environment in the Canadian Forces. As CBC News reported yesterday, military leaders had planned to ignore her suggestion. Hours after we reported that, Defense Minister Kenney announced that an agency would indeed be created. And now the government is looking to change the National Defence Act to include provisions similar to those inside the Victims' Bill of Rights. Would a military Victims' Bill of Rights improve things for victims of sexual misconduct in the ranks? How would it work with an independent agency? Joining me now, James Bezan, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence, Jack Harris, the NDP Defence Critic, and Marc Garneau is the Liberal Foreign Affairs Critic. Good to see you all. Appreciate you being here. James Bezan, let's start with you. Yesterday, Jason Kenney mentioned in front of committee that he was looking for something to put in place for the military that would mirror the Victims' Bill of Rights or be a way for the military to be part of that because they were explicitly left out. Give me a sense of what that would do for the military in these instances.
Well, we want to make sure that the military justice system is reflective of what we've already done under the criminal code and what we've done in the Victim Bill of Rights to ensure that there's a number of issues we want to bring forward, but particularly in dealing with the victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment within the Canadian Armed Forces. So it's about making sure that we have the proper legislation, and that's something that the Minister and of course the entire Judge Advocate General is working on right now. So
but why did we exclude the military in the first place then, if we're now going to have to find a way to bring them in or include them in somehow?
Happens normally is that as we move forward with changes to the criminal code and to civil law, then we have to make the adjustments under the National Defence Act and the military justice system, and so we will bring forward that type of legislation as quickly as possible so that we can make sure that we do mirror the civilian system.
Jack Harris, I think you were the one asking the Minister those questions. Did you get a sense of why this is happening now? Is it completely in response to the Deschamps report? Because
I don't know, frankly, but it's pretty clear that there was a major problem that was not addressed, even in the mandate for Madame Deschamps. She outlines it in her report. Excluded from consideration was the operation of the military police, the justice decision, the justice aspects of it, the discretion being exercised as to whether to lay charges. Yes. We do know, for example, they don't charge with sexual assault many times. They charge with conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. We know that, as Madame Deschamps said, people are not coming forward and complaining because they're not satisfied with the treatment that they get, and their own careers are the ones that are suffering. So there's clearly a fundamental problem here. I'm not convinced that a Victims' Bill of Rights type approach is going to solve the problem. We still have the inherent problem of the chain of command having the authority within that system in a way that deters people from complaining and hurts their careers.
So the solution in your mind is what? This independent body?
The independent body is a must. There also has to be an opportunity for a prosecution outside of the military system.
Right. Marc Garneau, what has to happen here? And does this idea that Jason Kenney has floated make sense to you?
I think yesterday was a very clear example of a huge damage control exercise. And it occurred because of the breaking CBC story that exposed the fact that 3 months ago, the Chief of Defence Staff received the report from Madame Deschamps, wasn't going to implement two of them, one of them being particularly important, this independent body. Yeah. The reason we have a problem in the military is because it is policing itself. We need this independent body to make sure that we can finally give people who feel sexually harassed a chance to go and speak and know that they're outside of that sort of chain of command. The government yesterday, I mean, look at what the Prime Minister said when he was asked a question. He clearly was not aware of the situation. And it bothers me that the Chief of Defence Staff, when a report such as Madame Deschamps was given to the CDS and he came out with a directive a week later or 10 days later, was not aware of any of this until he says a week ago. So what is happening here? He's the Minister of National Defence and he doesn't know what his Chief of the Defence Staff is doing about something as important as this sexual harassment situation?
So just so I'm clear now, what is the government's position on the independent commission? You are for or against it now?
No, we supported the military through this whole process, but got to remember this is what Chief of Defence Staff.
But wait a minute, James Bezan.
No, listen here. The Chief of Defence Staff did go and asked for this independent inquiry. That has happened with Justice Deschamps. And there was the final report, which all 10 recommendations were supported by the Chief of Defense Staff.
Well,
this
not
is
quite.
How
Well, not quite. Not quite. Now,
we
hang
have said
on.
that we-
Now, hang on. In principle, he accepted the recommendations, but he did not place all of them into action, including the idea of this independent council or independent place where people would go. So my question to you is actually quite clear. Does the government now support that an independent body needs to take those complaints?
And, you know, Major General Christine Whitecross has been very clear that she's going to stand up.
No, but James Bezan, that's not an answer. I'm asking what your government believes.
We are going to be supporting the military through this whole process.
But what does that mean?
Well, that means that we do support having
So if they
all 10.
don't
No,
want, so you don't have your own government position on that?
No, we've said we support all 10 recommendations. We support the military in implementing those 10 recommendations, which includes recommendation number 3, which is the independent organization that's going to look at how we deal with complaints of sexual assault and sexual abuse and sexual harassment, and also how we change the culture within the armed forces. So it's going to do the education and awareness side as well. So that's coming forward. Now, what Major General Christine Whitecross is doing is going to go out there and look at best practices and how other allies have implemented this type of system.
And be ready to report to the CDS on orders. That was what General Lawson said. Be ready to report back to the chain of command to the CDS.
So if you believe that an independent body is on the table, because that's one of the recommendations,
yes, it's on the table.
Why not rescind the directive that the Chief of the Defense Staff put forward saying ignore that?
Because
you can do that.
The Chief of Defense Staff came out yesterday, and in his statement was very clear that he supports.
It was not very clear.
No, it was very clear that he supports the final report. That he is going to help to ensure that all 10 recommendations are acted upon, and that he stood up the strategic response team and named Major General Christine Whitecross as the lead. And so she is in command. She's traveling the country. She's meeting with
I know, but if you
staff
believe,
across
if
this
the
country and
government
looking at how we
believes that
change
an
it.
independent body is needed, you can rescind the directive that the CDS put in place, and then it goes, and then that has to happen.
But there is, and as Chief was very clear, that we're moving forward on all 10. So that means that the directive's not even in play.
But only because he got caught out. The fact is, he very clearly 2.5 months ago issued a directive that said we're not going to have this independent body. We can take care of it in-house with the existing structures. And similarly, we don't need to have a special definition of sexual harassment. Obviously, there's a need for that within the armed forces because there's been some serious abuse. So really, he came out yesterday and had to really swallow himself whole because he'd been told by yourself or Minister Kenny, look, it's not going to go. So why don't you just rescind that directive that he put out 2.5 months ago? That would make it clear.
Look, none of this is new in the military.
I'll let you respond in a second.
There was a story in 1998. Maclean's opened up this wide. 15 years later, under mostly Liberal rule, we had the same kind of problem coming up again. Exactly the same story, different people, different dates, but the military did not fix that. The government tried to stand back and say, it's a military problem, you solve it. And what did we end up with? We ended up with an internal review where they gave themselves their own clean bill of health, an external review where they restricted the mandate, and even when they came back with pretty good recommendations, tried to bury them as quickly as they could. I mean, I think that this requires a fundamental change in the military. They're resisting, and even General Lawson said this in the press conference, they're resisting anything that takes this outside of the chain of command, and that's going to take major effort on the part of government to ensure that that can't happen, because it should not be allowed to happen.
So just to be clear, do you want a body outside of the chain of command?
Yeah, we have been clear, and I believe that Major General Christine Whitecross has been clear, as the CDS is as well, that we have to have a way so that people do not feel that they're intimidated or that they're going to be facing some sort of reprimands in promotion and moving forward. So there has to be a safe place for them to file their complaints and for them to be investigated independently. So we are definitely supportive of that, and that's what we're looking at. Now we're going to look at all the different allied nations and how they deal with it, and we want to make sure that we do this right. And that's why, getting back to some of the comments by Mark and Jack, is there has to be the proper penalties in place for those individuals that are, creating sexual harassment and sexual assault within the military, and that's why we're talking about bringing forward legislation to fix the criminal justice system within the Department of National Defense and Canadian Armed Forces.
How quickly could that happen? Just because we are getting near the end of this
we've only
parliament
had the final report in our hands for just over a week now. We are looking at those recommendations. We are talking, of course, with everybody within the military on how we move forward, including the Judge Advocate General, because that is where ultimately the changes are going to have to be drafted.
I got to wrap it up there. Thank you. That was interesting debate. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary.